As our cruiser pulled up to the small and unassuming house on Yeoman Street, I braced myself for the inevitable disgustingness I knew we were about to witness. Halfway through our morning shift, dispatch hit us with a 1054 possible body, and my partner and I, being the closest unit that wasn't dealing with a domestic dispute or some old lady mad at teenagers in skinny jeans, had the misfortune of checking it out. Neighbors hadn't seen the resident of the house in several weeks. Mail was piling up, and a particularly bad smell was beginning to make itself known. The house itself was, as previously stated, pretty unassuming. Just another little one-story white house sitting on just another little yard, but being on the police force for over a decade, I had over the course of time developed a good bit of what I'd call sixth sense skills. I could always tell when someone was lying. How? Because a liar won't stop talking. I could always tell when someone was going to try and run. How? Because a runner always starts looking off in the direction he's going to run towards, and I always knew when a house had a dead person inside it. How? Well, I'm not exactly sure, if I'm being honest. It was just a vibe I'd get. It's like the house is too still, too dark. It doesn't really feel like a house anymore. More like a mausoleum. "You want some?" Mike asked while holding out a small tub of Vicks Vapor Rub. Mike had been my partner for probably 5 years now, and had been on the force another 12 before we were teamed up. He had a good bit of sixth sense himself, and if he was putting Vicks under his nose, then that meant he had the same feeling about the house that I did. I gratefully accepted the offer and began applying the sharp-smelling gel under my nostrils. "I don't know why we bother. It's still gonna smell god-awful," I griped to my partner as my eyes began to water with the pungency of the substance. "Geez, I don't know. For good luck or some shit," he retorted sarcastically. I chuckled at the remark as we stepped out of the vehicle and made our way up the small gravel driveway towards the house. Looking around, I could see several of the neighbors standing on their porches and talking amongst themselves, watching with an unmistakable curiosity as we made our way up the stairs and onto the front porch. Nothing uncommon about it. Neighbors are nosy, and just like everybody deep down wants to see a train wreck, everyone deep down wants to see a body too. "All right," I said to Mike just loud enough for him to hear. "We go in, find the body, call the coroner, and get out of here before the smell sticks to our clothes." 10-4, he responded professionally. When it was time to work, Mike was all work. I always kind of admired how quickly he could go from work to work, and then back to play like that. The mailbox beside the front door was filled to the brim, and then some with mail. A small heap of waterlogged envelopes rested sloppy below it, and though the Vicks was still going strong, I could faintly make out the indescribably particular smell of what could only be a rotting human corpse. I pulled open the screen door and knocked 3 times sharply against the wooden door of the house. "Police, is anybody in there?" I shouted firmly through the door. Silence. After a few more moments, I repeated the knocking procedure. "Police, is there anybody in the house?" After a few more moments of haunting silence, I tried the doorknob. Luckily for us, it was unlocked. As I pushed the door open, a wave of rot and decay invaded our senses. It was a smell you never really got used to. Offensive was an understatement. Police were coming in. I shouted into the darkness as we made our way across the threshold and into the dimly lit tomb of a home. Hangings were always the worst. Have you ever seen The Book of Eli, where Denzel Washington finds that guy hanging in a closet and takes his shoes? The reality is way more disturbing than that. What Hollywood leaves out is that when you've been suspending 100 pounds plus by your neck for a few days, the gravity and the weight makes your spine stretch and stretch and stretch, turning you into some kind of inhuman-looking thing with a neck way longer than it's supposed to be. The flesh is ripped and pulled to seemingly impossible lengths. Your face is blue, and your body is green. Your tongue hangs out of your face, and your eyes are bulged out of their sockets like the most fucked up cartoon you could think of. Most people shit themselves when they die, and that shit drops down your leg and onto the floor below you. You bloat, and excrete horrible-smelling liquids from every pore. It might be a quick way to die, but it's torture for whoever has to find you. And the man we found hanging in the bedroom of this tiny little house was no exception to this. Fuck, that's terrifying, Mike whispered as we stared in shock at the suspended corpse in front of us. From what I could make out, he was a middle-aged man, based off the suit he was wearing, and the kicked-over chair caked in fecal matter. It was pretty easy to deduce how, or rather why, we were finding him like this. Though the sight was indeed terrifying, it was also a horrible, saddening reality that this line of work forced you to endure. Familiar pains of sadness and a thick blanket of guilt began to intrude. This is someone's son, maybe someone's dad, or husband or friend. My thoughts began to wander. If we had gotten a call just a few days earlier, or maybe if someone had noticed a change in him. I shook the thoughts aside with an internal forcibleness. We aren't in the business of maybes and probablys. That type of job doesn't exist. Most cops, myself included, joined the force because we wanted to help people, and though we couldn't help this man, we could help a loved one get him off the rafters. I don't know if that's justice, but it was the only rationale that got me through moments like these. Okay, Mike said in an overly professional and somber tone. I'm gonna call the coroner and get him down here. You okay to check the rest of the house? I nodded my head mechanically as Mike made his way out of the house. As his footsteps dissipated, the house fell eerily quiet. It was then that I heard a series of footsteps shuffle through the house. I jumped involuntarily at the abruptness of the sound. It sounded like someone had ran right past the door that my back was to. Mike, you still in here? Silence. I turned away from the hanged man and peered out around the corner and into the small hallway that led to the living room. Nothing. The same dimly lit house I had seen walking in. Mind's playing tricks on me. I thought, trying to calm my nerves, but as I turned back around into the bedroom, I gasped in horror. The room was empty. Completely empty. The body that had been hanging in such a grotesque fashion just moments prior was just gone. No, I almost screamed at myself while shaking my head in complete disbelief. No, that's impossible. That's impossible. Unable to process what I was seeing, or rather what I wasn't seeing, I began to back my way out of the bedroom and into the hallway that led to the living room and kitchen. But as I tried to back my way out, I bumped into the unmistakable frame of a person. As soon as I made contact, I felt a squish and my nose was hit with another, more intense wave of rot. Turning around quickly, I stood wide-eyed in complete horror of the sight before me. The dead man who had inexplicably vanished out of the bedroom was now standing mere inches away from my face, his condition unchanged, his stretched neck making him appear much taller in the most unnatural way possible. His bulging eyes stared at me with what I could only describe as a hunger, and I could see his mouth moving in what almost seemed like an attempt to speak. Maddening fear overtook every aspect of my being. I could feel myself running out of the house, but had no control of the movements my legs were making. I could hear the footsteps of the dead man chasing me through the living room. I could smell him right behind me. Periodically, I could feel stiffened fingers grabbing at my shirt, trying to pull me back into the house. After what seemed like an eternity, I threw myself out the front door and ran to my partner, who, upon hearing my screams of horror from within the house, was running up the driveway with his gun drawn. "Look, man, I believe you believe it," Mike responded cautiously as I attempted to explain what happened the best that I could in my panicked and beyond shaken state. "I've never seen you worked up like this, but it just ain't possible, guy. You're tired. These kinds of things always put us on edge. It's a claustrophobic house." As my partner tried to calm me down and reassure me that what I'd just experienced had to be some misconstrued and stress-induced figment of my imagination, the county coroner's vehicle pulled up. Unbothered by the state I was in, the coroner and his assistants walked past us into the house. Several moments later, the coroner came out with a perplexed look on his face. He walked over to where Mike and I were standing. "Which one of you called this in?" "I did," Mike responded. "You said the body was in the far bedroom," the coroner asked. As he did, I could feel the air being sucked out of our vicinity. Mike looked over at me, and then back at the coroner. "Yeah, back bedroom, where there's a fucking body hanging. Can't miss it," he responded, though he tried to come off sarcastic. The rising concern in his voice was prevalent. "Well, you're right about one thing. I can't miss it." The coroner replied harshly. "I can't miss it because it's the first thing you see when you walk into the house. He's hanging right there in the living room."